Welcome to the SmartTechCheck Podcast, hosted by Mark Vina, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck Podcast. Today is Thursday, May 5th, 2022. Joining me for today's podcast is my two illustrious journalism dynamos. That's Stuart Walpin, who scribes for Popular Mechanics, U.S. News, Techlicious, Investopedia, and other fine publications. Rob Peguero, who writes frequently on tech policy for Wirecutter, PC Magazine, and USA Today, America's hotel newspaper. And John Queen is out of pocket. We think he's at a Met event, not to be confused with the New York Mets. Stuart, sorry to
I wasn't confused.
Not to impose that, but how are both of you guys doing?
Good.
Sunny day on the East Coast. Lovely day.
Well, I can tell you one topic we're not going to talk about this week. I'm not going to say the Johnny Depp trial. I was going to say that, but I'm not going to say that. But we're not going to talk about Twitter.
Studiously avoiding it.
Yes, please. That could be a whole anti-podcast to do about that particular thing. But we're also not going to talk about Twitter. We kind of talked that into the ground last week. We missed you about that, Rob.
I would have had a lot to unfold, but I was 7 time zones to the right of Stuart, let alone 10 to the right of you.
Yes. Well, before we hit the topics I want to tee up today, because it's been kind of a sort of slow news thing outside the Supreme Court leaking decisions. That's a completely different.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
How was the play? But Rob, since you were not on the podcast last week, any thoughts on the Twitter thing? Just real quick.
So the latest plot twist I saw was that Elon Musk will become the temporary new CEO, which is insane. He already has 2 jobs, and he actually is good at running an electric car company and a spaceflight company. He doesn't know anything about running a social network, as we've seen from his tweets about how he'd run Twitter. Just an absolutely disastrous thing. Oh, and I guess the other thing is the financing his lineup, which includes funding from those free speech champions in the government of Saudi Arabia, their sovereign wealth fund. And I guess Larry Ellison is kicking in $1 billion, which, there's that line from The Empire Strikes Back. I've got a bad feeling about this.
Why am I always dealing with you guys that are always taking life lessons and you're gleaning them from movies that you've seen? I do the same thing, by the way. But But to your point, Rob, the shoe hasn't completely dropped on this whole Twitter thing. As we were talking about last week, a lot of things can happen between now and the closing. If the closing happens, he's got to lock down the financing. He may get under the coverage of this whole thing and decide, hey, what the hell did I, stick my foot into? I agree with you that, I'm not sure the shareholders of Tesla are going to be that crazy that he's going to presumably put on a third hat, even for a temporary period, because that's going to take his focus away from what his key business is, let alone the space company that he manages. Yep. So it's going to be an interesting thing, and this is likely going to turn into a bit of a saga that many promising screenwriters are taking notes on to do yet another Hulu series or HBO series on. But let us bring up the first list of topics here. And that is Sonos, and there's a typo there. It should be Sonos, not Sono. But Sonos is reportedly going to unveil its own competing Alexa voice assistant. And for the life of me, I don't get that. We already have enough challenges and issues in the smart home with competing standards. There's an initiative out there called Matter, which has been crawling at a snail's pace. It still hasn't surfaced yet with any devices that are interoperable across multiple voice assistants. But I understand there may be some business reasons why Sonos might want to do that, but Stuart, let me start with you. I just don't understand the logic, and I don't see how that's going to benefit consumers.
Well, first, on a much more overarching point, there's nothing wrong with more competition in any space, or almost any space, I should say. I think there's a certain degree of complacency that has crept into both the Google and Amazon voice assistant universe. I have not seen very much improvement in either one of them in terms of not paying attention to their names being spoken on television or by other third parties or in conversation. I haven't seen any major increase in their understanding. You still have to speak their language instead of them having to understand your language. So anything that lights up, and there's also the competitive issues of both Google and Amazon putting restrictions on where their voice can be assistance can be placed, and how much money they get and all of this. So I think there's a certain amount of monopoly creeping into this. So any competition, anything that lights a fire under Google and Amazon, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. I'm all for anything. If I don't think they have a ghost chance in hell, but if they could light a fire under Google and Amazon to get their acts moving forward, instead of almost standing still, I'm all for it.
No, I like that angle. I'm a true capitalist. I believe competition is a good thing on not just products, but services as well. And there's no question. We all agree that what Matter is trying to do, the CSA with Matter, is a good thing. We all, you generally don't want to root for a company, if you're in the analyst space or you're a journalist, but this space really needs it because there's so much confusion. And to your point, Stuart, is Sonos's entry into this space going to, nudge things along? I hope. I'm not sure they're big enough in that space to do that, but hope springs eternal. But I agree with you that competition is a good thing, and hopefully it will spur on the Matter guys to get their act together and get some devices out the door. And I think part of that, I wrote a piece about that last week on my newsletter, and they've been so painfully slow in getting some proof points out there. Here's some products that actually work under the Matter proviso. That the thing is that they want to make sure it works. I think they realize that if the first few devices that show up, if they don't work properly, and God knows there's journalists out there that are, got them in a bullseye right now for the first thing that shows up in the market and it doesn't work. So they obviously want to make sure that's ready for prime time. But Rob, let me pull you into your perspective on this. And, do you really think that it makes a lot of sense for Sonos to get into this space, given where they're headed?
I mean, I read the Verge's report saying that we'll have what are they calling it? The Sonos voice experience. Competing on privacy, good. But if you already have Siri competing on that ground, you've got the huge problem that this is not going to be in nearly as many places as Siri or Alexa. And I apologize to everyone whose devices just lit up when I said those two words. It's not even like Samsung's Bixby, which at least benefits from Samsung selling an enormous number of smartphones. So I don't know where they're going with this. And whoever is signing up for this, I hope they're not banking too much on this venture panning out.
Yeah, it's just one, every once in a while, and I know you guys feel the same way I do. You read a headline, you read the article, and you kind of scratch your head saying, what were they thinking? But,
yeah,
but I do think that, to your points, I think Stuart has made the most valid point, which is rare because, Stuart, you rarely make any type of valid points in any of your arguments. But this is an exception. I'm joking, of course. But I do think that hopefully it will have a beneficial impact from a competitive movement standpoint. That's probably a good thing. Let's hit the next topic here, and that is, Rob, this is right in your wheelhouse. You follow the carrier space quite a bit. Dish, which is kind of like, I want to compare them to Avis. The old adage with Avis, we're second, but we're better. But we try harder, that type of thing. They finally gotten their 5G network off the ground. They're kicking off in Las Vegas. They've got multiple cities plans. From your perspective, when you look at the landscape, Rob, do you think they're ready for prime time?
No. I mean, what we have here, the analogy is somewhat inexact. It's more as if Hertz bought Avis, or maybe Avis bought Budget. I mean, don't they already own each other anyways? But anyways, imagine you had a consolidation in the rental car industry, and the government said, okay, we need competition. So you two that just merged, you're going to give some assets to, I don't know, like a car sharing service like Getaround, which is then going to become a legit car rental service. And so that's what Dish is doing. T-Mobile, to buy Sprint, said, okay, we're going to first of all, let Dish rent our network for a little while longer. We're going to unload Boost Mobile, which was Sprint's prepaid brand, to Dish, which now runs that. And we're going to, various other considerations. The idea being that temporarily we go from 4 major carriers to 3, but we'll have 4 once again. And as part of this deal, Dish is committed to building out a nationwide 5G network and only 5G. And they're saying they can do it faster than usual by, essentially leapfrogging older technologies of cellular infrastructure. So that's all good. But yeah, a 5G network in one city is not, not what makes a national carrier.
Right.
The other thing I'd add, though, of course, is when you look at competition in the wireless industry, I don't know that we necessarily need Dish. Like, I hope they do well. I hope they can provide an innovative product with good pricing. But the whole fear when just over 2 years ago, T-Mobile completed the acquisition of Sprint, that, this is going to free up people to raise prices. And in fact, they've gotten cheaper. The news last week was AT&T raising prices only on the legacy limited data plans, where, if T-Mobile had yanked prices upwards, then you could say, we screwed up, anti-competitive merger. But in this case, we'll see. Dish is running an interesting experiment. They've got to do it. They have all the spectrum, some of which they've been a long time. And so I'm glad they're building it out. I guess next time I'm in Vegas, which I don't know, that might not be until CES in January. Perhaps I can test out this network, or perhaps they'll light it up in another city I'll be in sometime sooner. Right.
Well, not to your point, Rob. Being in 3 or 4 cities does not make a nationwide network, so they got a long way to go. I'm not sure that many people want to sign up to something with, betting on the come that, if I, sign up for Dish a year from now, they'll have much, wider coverage with 5G. So they got that problem to deal with. Yeah. But the other issue with Dish, and I know this because I worked for EchoStar. I used to work for Sling Media. I ran the marketing, as you know.
Right. Yeah.
Springbox, and they were owned by EchoStar, which was part of that whole Charlie Ergen, empire. And as you know, Dish has had a rich history, or Charlie's had a rich history of, from a channel standpoint, is that he was constantly getting in battles with the different programmers, and pulling programs off. He'd go toe to toe, and all of a sudden you'd find out, guess what? Tonight I can't watch Fox News, or I can't watch a certain channel, and that's not the most pleasant customer experience when that happens. When you sit down on the couch and you're trying to rest and just watch the news, So he has a bit of a combative business approach. And, that could happen, as they roll 5G out into these other cities, because as you know, when you're rolling these services out, even if you get past the equipment issues, you can do it more efficiently. You can do it, with more modern equipment. You can roll it out faster. There's still lots of negotiations that goes on. You just don't show up in a city and say, hey, let's put up a bunch of cell towers. There's lots of work that goes on in the back. So I'm, you don't want what a cell phone service subscriber doesn't want to hear is, well, guess what? I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and Dish just announced that they're battling with the city of St. Louis, and they can't put their 5G towers in place. So, I want to get your perspective, Stuart.
Well, I think there's just a number of aspects of this on an inside, on a truly competitive level. Apparently, the launch in Las Vegas, you can't bring your own phone. Apparently, you have to get this particular Motorola device. Phone is the only one you can use on the network. So obviously, they have a lot to figure out there with getting compatible phones. But on a much more inside industry kind of thing, during their earnings call in February, the Dish CEO dropped in that they lost 245,000 subscribers in the previous quarter. So it looks as if that Dish is looking at this to make a transition, given the competition they're probably getting from streaming and people cutting their cable, or in this case, cutting their satellite and going to streaming, that they've really got to change their business model. And they're counting on keeping to the timetable that the FCC have set for them, which is 20% nationwide coverage by mid-year, which is June of this year, and 70% coverage by the middle of next year. So I think that from a pure Dish point of view, this is something from a business perspective that they just have to do. They really don't have much choice if they're going to continue bleeding video and satellite subscribers. From a competitive point of view, is what I said before. Groundhog's Day. There's nothing wrong with more competition, and if it help, I mean, that was the big argument for the T-Mobile Sprint merger is it's going to reduce competition and raise prices. So again, capitalism 101, any competition is going to be good. I just think that Dish has got to get their shirt together, and it can't be one phone, and it has to be truly competitive. Obviously, there's consumer cellular and a lot of the prepaid, so there's a lot of competition in the space that looks as if they're trying to enter. So I think they have a lot of work to do if they're going to be a true fourth carrier.
Right. Well, again, I think we all hope that over time that there are, at least 4 or 5 very strong competitors that can sustain their presence. Because if the market, whittles down to, let's say, in an extreme situation, which I cannot foresee happening, but let's say the market completely coalesced around Verizon and AT&T, you would see prices come back up. You would see that. And what I'm hoping for is, the promise of 5G and the promise of even faster cellular topologies over time is going to be replacing hardwired cable to your house for internet access. That's the dream I'm looking for.
Well, you saw the T-Mobile announcement yesterday that they're essentially giving away the a free trial version of their home 5G, which offers faster service than most Wi-Fi that people get. Right. So that's that first first shot across the bow of the wired home Wi-Fi monopoly from your cable company, which again, competition, a good thing.
And that is one upside of T-Mobile buying Sprint that I don't think and people talked about, well, T-Mobile is going to have better 5G when they can get Sprint's mid-band frequencies. But I don't remember a whole lot of people. I know I did not then draw a line from that to say you can use this to provide no data cap, fast residential broadband over a big chunk of the U.S., which T-Mobile now does. And it's real competition. And the cable companies, they can say we have a faster connection, which is true. But Comcast also has this 1.2 terabyte data cap that is not justified by any sort of network engineering principles that I know of. And when T-Mobile can say, hey, we will sell you this service for just $50 a month, and it's actually the price, it doesn't double in the second year, Comcast should not overestimate the appeal of their current product, the way they price it and pitch it.
Well, I will tell you, I'm tired of paying my friends, I use that term very loosely, at Comcast, $180 every month, for my cable and my internet package. And there's no reason why, I look for the day where I can just deal with one vendor to handle everything, my cell phone coverage and my internet coverage. And that day can't come fast enough as far as I'm concerned. Let us hit the last topic, this is going to be a fun one. This is right in Stuart's wheelhouse. Let's talk a little bit about Netflix. A couple of weeks ago, they were kind of like the streaming entertainment company that couldn't do any wrong. And, they were supposed to gain some subscribers. I kind of shocked the market. I don't think shocking is not a strong enough word. They really kind of freaked out the market when they lost a couple 100,000 subscribers. They attributed to a lot of different things, but they even attributed to some of it, the Ukraine war situation. But at a macro level, and Stuart, I think I know how you feel about this, but I'd like you to opine on it. Is this really a sign that there's just too much content? There's too many choices? And, Netflix the field wasn't that crowded maybe 3-4 years ago. And so explain, is Netflix woes tied to a much more macro thing that's happening in the marketplace?
Anybody who is surprised that this happened is not paying any attention. We have been talking about this for months, that the competitors to Netflix, and this was, again, predictable. Anybody who looks at the history of technology or the history of capitalism knows that if one company is successful in a space, it's going to get competition, people who want to get there, and that's going to hurt the people who started off. I mean, this is not news. But I think the problem is not that there is too much content. I think the problem is the confusion about where the content is. I think most people, and I count myself, when I see there's a new show and I'm interested in seeing it, the first question I ask is, where can I find it? The industry has been doing a terrible job at making sure we know where your program is. For instance, I was trying to catch up on Ozark. Was it Ozark? No, it wasn't Ozark. It was another show. It'll spring to me in my head. But I had to start watching it on one streaming service, but they only carried Snowpiercer. I was catching up on Snowpiercer. And the first couple of seasons are on Netflix, but season 3 isn't. And I had to go searching, and season 3 is on TNT. They're free service, but you have to watch commercials. It's low resolution. I ended up just buying it from Amazon, but I'm going, I want to watch Snowpiercer. Why do I have to hunt around like I've lost my wallet in my house? This is insanity. And so I don't think it's a matter of too much content. I think it's a poor job of both the content providers and the services to make it easy to find the content.
Well, that's a universal search, and it's gotten better. It's still not where it needs to be. But the issue that you're citing, because I've experienced that issue myself, about 6 months ago, one of my favorite old TV series was the Odd Couple, Jack Klugman and I remember there was a very particular episode that had a particular line in it. And Hulu streaming, they bought the rights from CBS or wherever it was originally on ABC, but I think it was a CBS property. And that episode, if you look in their catalog, is not available. So obviously there was some licensing issue. They had all 5 seasons of The Odd Couple, but that one particular episode wasn't there, and it's got to be for whatever reason. And I haven't had time to peel into it, but obviously it's got to be they were not able to license that particular episode.
Is that the Assume episode?
Yeah, no, it was the. We'll talk offline. No, it'll get me into trouble because I'm not sure that could. You know what? This just occurred to me. It was a very funny line in 1975 when the show ran, and may not be so funny in 2022. That's the reason.
Offline.
Yes, we'll talk about that offline. But Rob, let me pull you into this. Netflix well, actually, let me ask you a more pointed question, Rob, because you're just a guy for a pointed question. The interesting thing that a lot of people have advanced, I don't know if I completely buy into this, but Netflix, really made its name on content that wasn't available anywhere else, original content that was really good, sharp content. And the show that House of Cards comes to mind, that you had to subscribe to Netflix to watch House of Cards, and and they had several programs like that that were almost must-see content. There are people now advancing the notion that some of the content on Netflix, some of the original content, is not terribly good. And even if it's good and high caliber, I'll use the word, it may be overly woke, a little bit left of center, maybe not appealing to a very broad portion of the audience. So does Netflix have a programming problem, and is it impacting their appeal?
No, I don't think so. Because number one, it's not a linear service. It's not as if them adding another series or a movie or whatever means you're stuck watching that. You watch whatever you want. They've got the recommendation algorithm and everything. What they do have, as we see in this nice little, if you can see that, they have an inflation problem. In 2014, the HD plan was $8.99 a month, and now it's $15.49. If you increase the price of something by 100%, even if you take 8 years to do it, people will notice.
Yes.
And I mean, if anything, we still have our Netflix account, and I wish I could make more use of it. On
that point, that's a very good point, Rob. So they've raised prices. They also, remember, got themselves in a little bit of hot water not too long ago with, cracking down on people that were handing out their user IDs.
Yeah. So I believe we were.
By the way, I do. I'm guilty of that. Mom uses my, and I'm not the only one. But I'm glad you admitted guilt. You'll get booted right off Netflix as soon as they find out.
So we were talking about this for a separate story. My description of it was, it's the golden age of television, but it's not the golden age of Rob's free time. I just don't have time to watch all the stuff that I want to watch on Netflix, to the point where, actually a lot of my viewing is the stuff I save on my Windows laptop that I wind up watching on airplanes when there's not a whole lot of other things I can do. And it's not, and of course there are all the other distractions. In 2014, my iPad wouldn't have had an entire screen that is mostly streaming services: Fire TV, Apple TV Plus, Amazon Prime Video, Sling TV. What am I missing? Disney Plus. Actually, yeah. So there's a lot more distractions, a lot more things that could take up your time. And so Netflix, I guess they're suffering from the fact that there's only so many hours in the day that you're going to put yourself in front of a rectangle of glass and plastic to watch something.
Well, I will just assert there's just so much content, on. I mean, it really, for those of us, and I count you two guys as, pretty damn good connoisseurs of really fine TV content, because when I see you guys in person, we're always talking about movies and classic TV shows, especially Stuart. I love having those kind of discussions with you, because you're such a, you talk about it with such passion, the behind the scenes issues that come up in TV shows and classic movies. I really think it's a wealth of a lot of content out there, and even content that's been out there, we talk about The Odd Couple, but classic TV series like St. Elsewhere and LA Law. The other day, Roku added, which I think is I just was watching it last night, a couple of episodes, Boston Legal. Remember Boston Legal?
Oh, yeah.
Roku is now is providing it free of charge. They have the entire catalog, and that was a superb series. And by the way, that the James Spader character absolutely would be in jail today if we some of the dialogue back in some of those episodes. But anyway, before we close out, we got a minute left. Stuart, any closing thoughts on this whole Netflix topic before we sign off?
Well, I think I'm all right. The issue of not having enough time is clearly one of the things, but I think what all of these services are going to end up doing, because they're all going to end up in the same boat as Netflix, is that they're all going to have to create lower tier advertising supported networks. That's the only way that they're going to be able to maintain any kind of level, because they're all in this great competition for content. The whole TV content model is changing radically because of the demand for content. There's a lot less money to be made because it's we'll take anything. And so the amount of money that the producers are getting is less. But with so much content constantly being needed to feed the beast, all of these services are going to have to introduce lower priced advertising supported networks, simply because there's simply no way that any of these services can afford to keep on pouring money down the new content hole.
No, I think that's a great point. And the business model has to change, and I think that all of a sudden, to bring your point together with Rob's, if Netflix lowers their prices back down to $6.99, $7.99, and they add an advertising component to it, you got to watch ads, I guarantee you'll see a lot of people come back to the fold, and I think you're right, Stuart. That is going to be the future of where streaming TV is going to go. But guys, thank you for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the SmartTechCheck podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @MarkVinaTechGuy. If you haven't already, please make a donation to the Red Cross or your preferred charitable organization to help the brave people of Ukraine in their time of need. And until next time, have a great week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.